The studio lights of Lorraine burned brighter than usual that morning. Producers rushed around with clipboards, adjusting microphones, fixing camera angles, whispering tense updates into their earpieces. Something felt off in the air, sharp, electric, unpredictable. Because today's guest wasn't just anyone. It was Sir Anthony Hopkins. The legendary actor, the man whose calm voice could silence a room and whose eyes carried a lifetime of stories, walked into the green room with the same quiet dignity he always carried. But even he sensed it. The tension, the careful stares, the way assistants avoided meeting his eyes. "Everything all right?" Hopkins asked his young assistant, Megan. She hesitated. "Yes, Sir Anthony. But, Lorraine's team requested we avoid certain topics today." He raised a brow. "Since when do I need permission to speak?" Megan swallowed. "They said Lorraine is in a mood." Hopkins chuckled softly. "Ah, aren't we all?" But the truth was deeper. A week earlier, Hopkins had done an interview hinting that morning shows were becoming more gossip than journalism. Lorraine Kelly's name had come up indirectly. She had not taken that well. So today, she had something to prove. When the cameras rolled live, Lorraine greeted the audience with her usual warm smile, but her eyes were colder than winter glass. Her voice was sweet, but stiff. "And now," she said, "a man who needs no introduction. Sir Anthony Hopkins." The audience applauded as Hopkins approached. He smiled politely, shook Lorraine's hand, and sat down. But from the moment he settled into the chair, he felt the studio shift, like the ground was preparing to crack. Lorraine began gently enough. "Sir Anthony, your new film is creating incredible buzz." "Yes, we were very pleased with the work." "And you're 87 now, still going strong." Hopkins chuckled. "Age is a number, Lorraine." But then, she leaned forward. Almost too casually. "So," she said, "I watched your interview last week. You called morning shows, gossip panels, didn't you?" The audience gasped softly. Hopkins blinked, surprised she had gone straight for it. "I said many morning shows focus on sensationalism, yes. Not all. But you meant this show, didn't you?" Lorraine pressed, her smile tightening like a stretched rubber band. "I meant what I said," Hopkins replied calmly. "If the shoe fits." "Oh, the shoe fits, does it?" Lorraine cut him off. The control room panicked. "Cut to wide shot. Change the angle. For God's sake, someone signal Lorraine to calm down." But she didn't calm down. Her voice grew sharper. "You think because you've won awards you can insult hardworking journalists. People who show up every day. People who built you up for decades." Hopkins lifted his chin. "I don't need building up, Lorraine. I've built myself." The audience froze. Producers whispered frantically behind the cameras. Megan, watching from the side, covered her mouth. Lorraine laughed, but it wasn't the friendly TV laugh. It was brittle, mocking. "You're quite bold for someone who begged to come on this show." Hopkins' eyes narrowed slowly. "Begged? Yes," she said firmly. "Your team contacted us, not the other way around." "That's not true," Megan whispered from the shadows. Hopkins turned to Lorraine. "If you're going to confront me, at least start with facts." Her face flushed red. "Oh, facts," she snapped. "The fact is your career isn't what it used to be. You need publicity." A wave of stunned shock swept through the studio. Hopkins' expression hardened, not angry, but deeply disappointed. He spoke softly, but every syllable cut like a blade. "Lorraine, you've become cruel." The air went dead. Not a sound, not a breath. Even the cameras seemed to pause. Lorraine stiffened. "Excuse me. You used to uplift people," Hopkins said, voice almost sad. "You used to tell stories. Now you hunt for conflict because it keeps your ratings alive." "That's enough," she snapped. But Hopkins continued, and the world listened. "You aren't interviewing me, Lorraine. You're provoking me. And that's not journalism." The audience murmured. Lorraine's eyes flared. "If you don't like how I run my show, you can leave." Hopkins slowly rose from his chair. "I think I will." Gasps filled the air. Producers nearly fainted. Megan rushed forward as Hopkins reached for his coat. Lorraine stood too, voice trembling with fury. "Security, please escort Sir Anthony off the set." The entire studio erupted. Crew members tried to calm Lorraine. The audience stared wide-eyed. Megan held Hopkins' arm, ready to guide him out. A guard approached, but Hopkins held up a hand. "No need," he said with quiet grace. "I know the way." And with that, the legendary actor turned his back on the bright lights, the cameras, the chaos, and walked toward the backstage hallway. But just before he disappeared behind the curtain, he stopped, and said one final line that would shake the entire media world. "Lorraine, you've just proven my point." The curtain closed. The studio went silent, and social media exploded. The moment Sir Anthony disappeared behind the curtain, the studio spiraled into pure chaos. Lorraine's microphone was still on, and millions of viewers heard her mutter under her breath. "He's finished, absolutely finished." Producers exchanged horrified looks. Cut to commercial. One yelled, "We can't, this is live." Another shouted. But before they could salvage the situation, cameras caught Lorraine dropping into her chair, shaking with anger as she tried to maintain her signature smile. Viewers at home could practically feel the tension pressing through their screens. Backstage, Hopkins leaned against the wall, breathing slowly. Not because he was tired, but because he was disappointed. He had expected a conversation, maybe even a disagreement, but not open hostility. Megan, his assistant, hovered nervously. "Sir Anthony, are you all right?" He gave a small nod. "I've faced harder scenes in real life than this." "What she said was cruel," Megan whispered. "So unprofessional." Hopkins sighed. "People reveal themselves when they're threatened." She looked at him anxiously. "Social media is already exploding." Hopkins blinked. "Already?" Megan held up her phone. Posts were pouring in, millions of views within minutes. Greater than, "Lorraine attacks Anthony Hopkins live on air." Greater than, "Hopkins walked out, this is insane." Greater than, "Lorraine just ended her own show." Hopkins shook his head. The internet loves a fire. Suddenly, a producer rushed toward them, pale as chalk. "Sir Anthony, please, can we talk?" Hopkins turned slowly. "Is Lorraine sending you to apologize?" The producer exhaled sharply. "She's refusing to continue the show until you speak to her." Megan's jaw dropped. "After she insulted him? Are you serious? She's threatening to walk off set." Sponsors are calling. The network executives are watching live from the control room. They're demanding damage control. Hopkins crossed his arms. "And you want me to clean up her mess?" "No, no," the producer said quickly. "We just need you to return. Even for a minute. Just to say something calm so the show doesn't collapse." Hopkins stared at him, unblinking. "What does she want from me?" "A mutual apology." Megan almost laughed. She humiliated him. On live TV. The producer whispered, "Sir Anthony, please. The network is panicking. Lorraine is threatening to quit." Hopkins paused for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "I will speak," he said finally. "But not to protect ratings." Meanwhile, back on set, Lorraine sat stiffly, lips pressed tight, staring into the camera with a fragile smile. But her eyes glimmered with something darker, fear. The control room was in meltdown. "Lorraine, stay calm. Don't say anything else. Just breathe." But she ignored them. "I'm not the villain," she whispered to herself. "He embarrassed me." She glanced at the audience, eyes filled with shock and confusion. For the first time in years, her authority was slipping. A floor manager stepped onto the stage. "Lorraine, Sir Anthony is willing to come back out." Her relief flickered, just for a second. Then she straightened her shoulders. "Good. Let's clear this up." But she had no idea what she was about to face. Hopkins stepped back into the studio with the grace of a man who had nothing to prove. The audience erupted into applause, louder than before. Lorraine forced a smile. "Thank you for returning. I think we both said things." Hopkins gently raised a hand. "Lorraine, before you continue, I want to speak." She blinked, startled. "Oh, of course." Hopkins turned to the audience, then to the cameras, millions watching live. "I did not come here to argue," he said softly. "I came to speak about art, life, and aging with dignity." The room fell silent. "But dignity," Hopkins continued, "requires mutual respect." Lorraine's throat tightened. "I have survived decades in an industry that can be cruel. I have seen fame rise and fall. But I have always believed interviews were conversations, not battlefields." Murmurs rippled across the audience. Hopkins looked directly at Lorraine. "You felt insulted by my previous comments. But instead of asking, you attacked. Instead of clarity, you chose conflict." Lorraine's eyes glistened, with anger or regret, no one could tell. "And I forgive you," Hopkins said simply. The entire studio froze. Lorraine wasn't expecting that. Her defenses crumbled for a moment, revealing something vulnerable beneath the hard television persona. She opened her mouth to respond, but Hopkins wasn't finished. "But forgiveness," he added, "does not mean I will continue this interview." Lorraine blinked hard. What? Hopkins gave a slow, respectful bow to the audience. "I wish you all a lovely day." And he walked off the set for the second, and final, time. This time, he did not stop. The cameras captured Lorraine standing alone, her hands shaking slightly, her script rattling in her grip. Producers stood frozen. The audience held its breath. Then, she snapped. "I'm done," she shouted, ripping off her microphone. "I'm not doing this anymore." Gasps filled the room. Lorraine stormed off the stage. The network cut to an emergency graphic. "We will return shortly." But the damage was already done. Within hours, headlines worldwide screamed,